Welcome everyone. This is Mary Whitaker with the Ohio State Medical Association Education Team, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Jennifer Hayhurst, Director of Regulatory Affairs at the OSMA. For the past year or so, Jennifer has been our go-to person on all things medical marijuana, and as you can imagine, this has been a very interesting topic to work on. Whether you are interested in recommending medical marijuana or not, it is important to be aware of these laws and regulations. So Jennifer, what do Ohio physicians need to know about Ohio's medical marijuana law?
Thank you, Mary, and I hope we can go over a brief introduction of what physicians in Ohio need to know about medical marijuana recommending. As Mary said, this is going to be a brief overview. It's not going to be an extensive deep dive into medical marijuana regulations statewide or on a federal level, but really just to kind of clear up some things that you've probably been hearing and to give you some tools to find out more information if you need to find out more information, whether it's because you want to recommend or because you have a patient who has been recommended medical marijuana and you want to find out some more information about that. So we will again go over the federal medical marijuana laws and enforcement policies, very brief, only a couple slides just to kind of give you a basis of where that lies right now. And then we're going to talk about the provisions that came out of Ohio House Bill 523, and that's the House bill that really created the medical marijuana rules and statutes in the state of Ohio. And then we're going to go over the regulatory agency's responsibilities, and it's not just the medical board, it's not just the pharmacy board in this case. There are a few different regulatory agencies who have very detailed and different responsibilities in the medical marijuana environment in Ohio. So again, very briefly, under federal law, marijuana is prohibited for both recreational and medical uses. Let that sink in a moment. It's prohibited. So the next slide, I will let you know how the states get around that. Because marijuana is technically classified under the Federal Controlled Substances Act as a Schedule I drug. The highest tiered drug. It's a Schedule I drug under federal law. So how do the states then have medical marijuana, and how do some of the states even have recreational marijuana? Well, there are these memos, you might have heard of them, the Cole memos and the Ogden memo, that really clarified and gave guidance on the topic of marijuana in different states. And really, without going into too much detail of all of these memos, what they said was that the states can do what the states want to do, and then the federal government can decide, depending on who's in power, whether or not they're going to go after the states for making the decisions that they decide to make. So far, especially with medical marijuana, the federal government to date has kind of stayed away from any kind of action against the states who have allowed medical marijuana in their states. It's very much a wait and see what happens, but right now, the federal environment is one of let the states do what they're going to do, and the federal government's not going to stand in the way. That could change, but that is the environment for now. So, again, I told you it was going to be brief on the federal level, but really let's get into the Ohio specific provisions, because these are most important, I think, to Ohio physicians and Ohio patients. So as I mentioned, the laws came out of Ohio House Bill 523. You might remember that was effective about 2 years ago. And because the powers that be in the government knew that this was not something, this is brand new in Ohio, this is not something that could hit the ground running, they gave the different agencies, different regulatory agencies, a few different timelines for what had to be done when in the program, but they said the program has to be fully operational by September 2018. So really, a couple more months, this program has to be operational under Ohio law. Some important provisions that kind of make Ohio's medical marijuana rules stand out, or law stand out from other states. Only a licensed physician is able to recommend medical marijuana to a patient. And again, we use that word recommend. You're not prescribing to a patient, you're recommending to a patient. There is a difference. No one in the state of Ohio will be able to grow their own medical marijuana under our laws. In some states, they do allow patients to have plants, not in Ohio. No Ohio patient can grow their own medical marijuana under this program. Also, another distinction in Ohio is that patients will not be permitted to smoke medical marijuana. There are different accepted uses, and we'll go over those in a moment, but the patient will not be permitted to grow or smoke the drug in Ohio. So patients in Ohio can only be recommended medical marijuana by a physician if they have a qualifying condition, and we will go over those lists of what a qualifying condition consists of. Another important facet of these rules is that you have to have a bona fide physician-patient relationship. So what this means is that it can't be a casual relationship. It can't be a patient that goes into a medical marijuana, quote-unquote medical marijuana physician and gets the recommendation, and then the next month goes to another one, or maybe a few months later goes to another one. The state, when they were putting this law together, they really want the patient and the physician to have a relationship. There's the expectation that the physician who recommends medical marijuana is going to have a relationship with the patient and provide ongoing care for this patient. That it's not, it's not a one-stop shop and the expectation is that you're not going to see this person again. They really wanted a caring environment for this patient. So the qualifying conditions, you can see on the slide here, you can see most of them are pretty specific. There's not a lot of wiggle room in a lot of these conditions. You either have this condition or you don't. I always highlight that pain, chronic or intractable pain, is a qualifying condition. Now, in that one, there's a little bit of, the physician would definitely have to note in the patient's medical record why the person's pain is to a level that is chronic, severe, or intractable. Whereas, it's not as simple as a positive test that's saying that you have one of the other qualifying conditions. This would be probably a little bit more documentation that this person has pain that is so severe or chronic or intractable that you believe that medical marijuana will treat this person's pain appropriately. So some more important provisions in Ohio law. There is a mandatory ORS query for physicians who are recommending medical marijuana. That makes sense. I think everybody can understand why that's required. You do want to see, if your patient is on other substances or if they have a history of being on other substances, and that is important. If minors are allowed to get a recommendation for medical marijuana if they have one of the qualifying conditions, but you do have to keep in mind that the parental consent is required if you are recommending to a minor. A written recommendation for medical marijuana cannot exceed 90 days, and then the physician can renew that recommendation, but not for more than 3 additional periods of 90 days in a year's time. So every 90 days, the patient can come back, you can recommend again, and then at that year mark, there will have to be another exam and documentation of that patient's condition who is taking the medical marijuana. There are some immunity and civil liability protections in the Ohio law. That's important to note. Some states do not offer those protections to physicians who are recommending. And another interesting provision in Ohio law, physicians who are recommending have to submit reports to the medical board describing their observations on the effectiveness of medical marijuana. Now, this does not mean on every single patient that you have that you are recommending medical marijuana, you have to write to the medical board and let them know how, Sally Smith is doing. This is really more of a collection of those patients and what your thoughts are on the effectiveness of medical marijuana. What do you think, based on your patient base and your observation of that patient base that you have on medical marijuana, what do you as the physician feel about the treatment of these patients with medical marijuana? And there'll be more specifics about what that report has to contain on the medical board's website. A couple more guardrails in the law. Our system is very tight in Ohio. It's called, if you hear it referred to, it's a seed to sale system where the Department of Commerce is really tracking the medical marijuana product all the way from when it's a seed through when it's growing, through it gets processed, when it's tested after it's been processed, and when it's dispensed to the patient. So they really want to make sure that this is a very tight, secure, safe system for Ohio patients. Also, in the same vein, there are criminal records checks requirements for anybody who is cultivating, processing, or dispensing this product. Ohio did make sure that they put a lot of safety mechanisms within this law to make sure that we have one of the best laws in the country. Just some kind of technical information for you in case you're interested or somebody asks. There are limits as to how much THC the medical marijuana can contain, and that's why we have the laboratory testing requirement. You may wonder why we have that, and that's to make sure that the plant material doesn't exceed certain THC levels. Again, I mentioned before there's a maximum 90-day supply with a yearly reassessment. Only the following may be dispensed. Now, as a physician who's recommending, you're not going to be dispensing, but you should know what your patient has the ability to obtain. That would be oils, tinctures, plant materials, edibles, and patches. So again, you'll see there, you can't smoke anything. They can vaporize the medical marijuana, but they can't smoke it, but they can eat it. It can be an oil or an ointment or something like that, or a patch. But again, no plant material that it's intended for smoking in Ohio. So I mentioned that there are a couple different regulatory agencies that are involved. I think from a physician's perspective, you're going to probably be paying the most attention to the state medical board, of course, because they are the ones who are going to issue the certificate to recommend. And then the Ohio Pharmacy Board, because you will have some interaction with the pharmacy board, of course, through ORS, and then also through the patient registration process. Department of Commerce is really doing everything from, they're the seed to sale regulatory agency, where they're really tracking the plant and what happens to the plant after it's been grown, and then through the dispensary. And then I always throw local government zoning up there as one of the agencies, not agencies, but one of the government entities that's involved, because there are a lot, I'm sure if you read the news, watch the news, there are a lot of municipalities, cities, townships who are restricting the location of dispensaries, or saying we don't even want them in our city or town, or our county. So as a physician who may be thinking about recommending medical marijuana, you probably do want to be aware of what the environment is in the community that you're living in, whether or not there are going to be dispensaries in your area, and if not, and you decide you do want to recommend, or you have patients who had been recommended medical marijuana, you probably should be able to tell them where they can go to obtain the product. State Medical Board of Ohio is probably the best, or is the best source of information if you are interested in obtaining your certificate to recommend. We will be having another quick webinar like this one, where we will be telling you a little bit more information about how to get that certificate to recommend. But if you do want more information on how to get that, there's a great video on the medical board's website that kind of walks you through how to do it. And also you can find all the code sections, which I've listed here, that just tell you how to get it, how to get the certificate to recommend, what they expect, what the standard of care is, what happens if you don't adhere to that standard of care, and then it'll go over some information on if there are going to be diseases added or taken away from the qualifying condition list, how to go about amending that list, and that's all part of the medical board's rules. So just to wind up this quick presentation, I want to let you know there are resources out there. The OSMA has a link to a lot of resources on our website. Of course, I just mentioned the medical board's website, the pharmacy board's website. Although they haven't quite gotten together all of their rules yet, when they are up and running, that will be where you want to look for patient registration information and dispensary information. If you want kind of a one-stop shop of all the different regulatory agencies and what they're doing, and kind of the timelines of where they are, that would be the last one, the medicalmarijuana.ohio.gov website. And that will give you information about all of the agencies who are involved and what kind of stage they're in right now of the development of the rules. And now I'll turn this back over to Mary, who's going to give you some closing information.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a very good summary of the federal and state laws. For physicians interested in recommending medical marijuana, or if you just want to learn more about the process, I encourage you to listen to the physician certification webinar. We'll be posting more information throughout the summer on issues such as affirmative defense, commerce, and patient management, but we also want to hear from you what's important for you to know. So please send your comments to info@osma.org. We appreciate that. Thank you again for your membership and support of organized medicine in Ohio.